Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Kevin. Uh, First, get our cup of coffee here. Stay caffeinated, right? Okay, I can sit back and sip on that while I expound on some information here. So, in my last episode, I mentioned that I was going to be discussing some moments around implementing BCM, business continuity management on ServiceNow, and particularly starting out with some aha moments that our clients have had around the BIA process, the business impact analysis process. It's kind of the starting point, right? A lot of times people will perform BIAs to determine the most critical business functions or business applications to then determine, okay, I need to have plans for these, right? I may not need to have plans for everything in my organization, but definitely the mission critical business functions and applications. I want to make sure I have either a disaster recovery plan or some kind of business continuity plan around those. So in the BIA process, we're going to be asking some questions. So yes, there's the typical question of the impact questions, right? The impact of what's the financial impact, reputational impact, legal impact, workplace impact, uh, to help determine an RTO, right? A recovery time objective, or your data, right? How quickly is this data changing if I'm dealing with an application so I can get to my RPO, my recovery point objective of my data. Okay. Yes, that those are the pieces that we really want to drive to and really want to get our RTO and RPO out of. But there's also probably other information in your BIA process today that you're asking for, right? And other data points that you're asking for. So the the real thing that this comes down to is ensure that your data is ready to be analyzed. It seems simple, right? But the ideal end let's be clear about the ideal end result before we start configuring the BIA process and the BIA inside ServiceNow, right? So beyond those impact questions that I mentioned, right, what other data points do you need to gather that will help you justify the RTO potentially, right? Or also will help make business decisions later on around those BIA results. Okay, so you can gather that information inside the BIA as well. So these can be fields inside the BIA form. We can add some fields in there to capture this information. Potentially, this is information that may be stored in the CMDB or should be stored in the CMDB because it's actually a data point that would be relevant for other business processes that are running on ServiceNow, be able to digest this same piece of information. So we may want to actually have it in the CMDB and bring it forward to the BIA. Or maybe it's purely on the BIA, and that's fine. We can create a field for it and capture that information. But as you come up with these, right, some questions you want to ask, all the data points that you've been gathering, all the data points you potentially want to gather, you want to start asking yourself some questions. So is this on the BIA only, or is it useful for other areas? And if it is, maybe start looking at the CMDB record of that business function or that business application and see if it should be an attribute inside your CMDB. That's one question. Okay. Then the next is how can this data be used? And is it required? If the data is not required, you really want to, and you're not sure how it's going to be used, you just think it's a good idea to capture it, you may want to revisit whether you want to capture that information or not, right? If it's not required, maybe you don't want to have people just fill it out superfluously, right? So you really want to think about what's really required for us to make some decisions here and really look at that. In For a lot of our clients, their short answer is if it's not required, we don't want the field there, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. But you may have, hey, if they give it to us, great. If not, that's fine too. You may have that kind of outlook on some data points. What data points does your leadership want to see? What kind of reports does your leadership want to see? So you may have to gather some data points purely to feed some reports that are necessary, right? They may want to see that so that they can make some business decisions based on other items as well as the BIA. So through this, you're going to be making a lot of decisions, right? So it helps you to have kind of a resiliency steering committee, if you will, as you're doing this BIA process and bringing the BIA process into ServiceNow. That steering committee can help you make decisions on, yes, that data point stays. Yes, it's required. Yes, this is why we want it. So then you can explain that to the end users, right? When they ask, why am I giving you this piece of information? Why are you requiring this piece of information? This is why, right? You can even put that as a little help topic, help link inside the system to show them this is why we're gathering this piece of information. The other area that you may look at to say, hey, maybe we're missing some data points. Maybe there's other things we should be capturing. You could go to your internal audit team and say, hey, is there anything that we could help out with in the BCM BIA process to gather and to document that would help out the audits that you've been going through, right? Either internally or externally. Maybe there's some data you can capture there. So an example of this, right? So, okay, so give me an example of a data point that should be required on the BIA. We are going to use it for something, and it's going to result in some kind of outcome. So one of the aha moments was there was a client who was gathering the number of people that supported the business process. So they were doing a BIA on a business process, business function. And one of the questions they asked was, and one of the data points that they gathered was, how many people support this process? When they were doing that, as they went through the process and did their BIAs against all their business processes, and they came out with their recovery tiers, they found that they had some business processes with a recovery tier of mission critical. So these were mission critical. They couldn't go down. They had to be very, very well, big continuity problems, right? So these mission criticals were supported only by 1 or 2 people. So by going through and asking that question at the time of the business impact analysis, not only did they get the RTO, right, which was probably immediate, maybe 2 hours, and the recovery tier of mission critical to their business, they also realized that they only had a couple of people supporting that process. So now they had that data point to go back and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. We need more people that are trained on this, more people that can support this, potentially more people in different locations, right? Because maybe that was done out of one location and they needed to spread that out in case they had an event at one of those particular locations. So then they were able to take that data point, and the outcome was be able to go back to management and say, hey, we need more people on this. We need to cross-train more people on it. We need to get more people in different locations. We need to be able to do this better, right? To be able to, this is one of our mission critical apps, and we only have a couple of people who know how to do it. So from there, they're able to take that and come back. And that was gathered during the business impact analysis process. So that's an example of a data point, right? It's not necessarily a question, an impact question that's going to help you with your RTO, but it's something gathered during that process that helped make decisions later on, combined with the results of the BIA and the RTO and the RPO. So hopefully that kind of gives you some food for thought there and some thoughts around data that you're collecting during your BIA process, some data you should be collecting, maybe data you don't need to be collecting, and also just give you maybe your own aha moments. So appreciate you listening. Next time we're going to be talking a bit more about BIAs, but digging in a bit more on the impact questions, the ones that drive the RTO and the RPO, and a couple aha moments around those types of questions. So again, appreciate you listening. Provide any kind of feedback, comments, likes, always appreciated from me. Stay caffeinated out there.